Hello, everyone. For OneWrestling.com, this is Bill Apter on the line right now in our tribute to George Scott, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Welcome back to OneWrestling.com.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a long time.
It has. And some of my favorite memories of the days that I was on the road all the time were so many of the matches and scenarios that you were involved in, courtesy in the background of George Scott. I always tell people that when they ask me the list of my favorite matches, the series of years of you and Ric Flair were just incredible to me. Tell us how George Scott was involved.
Well, when I came to the Carolinas, 1977, George was the booker, the matchmaker. And I guess he saw something in me matching my look with the black hair, going up against Ric Flair with his blonde hair. And I believe right at that time in 1977, Rick was probably the number one slotted heel for Jim Crockett Promotions Company.
Yeah, he was the bad guy.
Yep, he was the number one guy in that slot in the Carolinas. I know that Wahoo McDaniel wanted to get a run with him, with Rick. With that being said, George Scott stepped up and, along with Rick, and put us together. And I think ultimately there was a decision for Rick to make to start something, work with Wahoo or Ricky Steamboat. And now Wahoo was an established guy. He was a main eventer, a hard worker. Had a great presence about him, and also could sell some tickets. But I think between Ric Flair and George Scott, they saw something in this new kid that had just come to the Carolinas. And, I came there in and around February of 77, and in and around June of the same year, I'm starting to get hooked up with Ric Flair. And, of course, the rest is history. And we worked with each other all the way up through, up to 89. So,
If you could...
But George was very, very instrumental in making that final decision of matching myself up with the Nature Boy.
If you could cull the most important thing that you learned from George Scott, what would you say that was?
There's one thing in our business, and especially back in the 70s and 80s, that was a major deal if you went along with it. And what I'm trying to say, Bill, is trust. There was so much going on, as you would hear in other territories, of guys getting shafted, guys getting snowballed, guys getting smoked, being told one thing and then led down the path which ended up being something else. But George Scott was pretty much a straight shooter, in my opinion. At least he was with me. And he was one of those guys that would come up to me, and I remember when he first started putting me in with the program, he said, "Just listen and just trust me. I'm not going to steer you wrong." He was pretty much a man of his word. So I think the biggest thing that I learned from George, but he also taught, that being said, he also taught me that when you trust somebody, but then along that path, you also learn how the guy's trying to snowball you. And I'm not talking about George Scott, other people. And just listening to him talk and him teaching me along, and times that he would ride with me from like Charlotte to Raleigh, or Greenville, South Carolina, Greensboro, whatever. Years of experience is once once you can feel comfortable with somebody and trust that person, and knowing that he's not going to steer you wrong, there's a wealth of knowledge behind that.
Did you ever, in your early days with him, get into the ring with him, training?
No. I positively can say that never. You know, I think there might have been a couple of times just goofing around the locker room that some of them just wanted to lock up with me. And when I reflect on that, it was maybe a match that I had with Ric Flair at the end of the night. We went out there and we worked 55 minutes in a 60-minute time limit. And he came up to me and just spun me around and put a lock up. And just one lock up and just said, "Kid, you had a hell of a match tonight." You know?
That's great.
So,
That's great. Were you with him when he went to the WWE?
oh, yes, he was very instrumental in getting me up to the WWE with, Vince Jr.
Right. Right.
So there's a man that had played a major role in my career in the Carolinas and given me my main event big break. And then in the mid-'80s, in around 85, and talking with Vince, got me to, come up to, to leave the Carolinas, which was home for me. And I was, in a good position to go to venture to work for the WWE at the time.
Yes. And what a...
So, so Bill, when you sit back and think of it, and you ask the question, how much of an influence did this man have on my career?
Well, yeah, and it's all because George Scott held your hand and brought you there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, a lot of people come and go in our business, as you know, and seen, and you know how other people have influenced their careers, whether it be good or bad. And I've asked myself the question on, with the influence that George had me in the Carolinas, brought me to hook up with Ric Flair, because when that happened, all of a sudden my name became a national, I became nationally known, through guys like you, who put me on the covers of, Wrestling Illustrated magazines and so forth and so on, and the interviews that you did with me. But it was only because of, once again, you got to find out what the source was, and that is, George Scott hooked me up with Ric Flair. And then again, here's the same man that got me to go to the WWE in the mid-'80s and carry my career to another level. The point that I'm trying to make is, other wrestlers, if I would have a discussion with them, I'm sure that they would say, well, Ricky, you had enough talent, that if George was never around, that somehow, some way he would have figured it out. Well, that's good and well to say, but I know for sure that my career holds a lot of thanks and gratitude to George Scott.
One of the things...
Because of him, it got me national publicity, worldwide publicity. I mean, it was because that got me notarized over in Japan. And then here we go around the world with the WWE in the mid-'80s. So, I mean, it just can't get any better than that.
One of the things that you don't know about, probably, is the relationship I had with him was magnificent. And whenever I'd come to a show, let's say in the Carolinas or any place where you or some of the other people he believed in, and he believed very strongly in you, he would make sure periodically to pick up the phone, ask how I'm doing, and saying, yeah, Ricky Steamboat's doing this, or Ric Flair is doing this, or Roddy Piper is doing this, and it'd be a good idea if you were here. So
he was,
yeah.
He was, a lot of times he would be thinking out of the box, but, and you would have a second thought about his judgment, but at the end of the day, 6 months down the road, you look at your career and you say, oh my God, I just jumped a couple of levels,
Yeah.